There's more on Thumos in the preface to Fukuyama's book. He says Thumos is the part of the soul that craves recognition of dignity. Uh, Isothumia is the demand to be respected on an equal basis with other people, while megalothumia is the desire to be recognized as superior. Okay, so you have thumos, that part of the soul that craves recognition, but you could have a form of thumos that just wants equal recognition. And so isothumio is like an isosceles triangle, where you have two sides of a triangle that are symmetrical and balanced, equal. And then megalothumia is the desire to be recognized as superior. You want you're like a megalomaniac, a megalothumia wants an abundance of respect, more respect than anybody else, superior respect. Okay. Um, so he's going to use this terminology, so this is important to have in mind. And then he goes on to say, modern liberal democracies promise and largely deliver a minimal degree of equal respect, embodied in individual rights, the rule of law, and the franchise, the right to vote. What this does not guarantee is that people in a democracy will be equally respected in practice, particularly members of groups with a history of marginalization. Entire countries can feel disrespected, which has powered aggressive nationalism, as can religious believers who feel their faith is denigrated. Isothumia will therefore continue to drive demands for equal recognition, which are unlikely to ever be completely fulfilled. The other big problem is megalothumia. Liberal democracies have been pretty good at providing peace and prosperity, though somewhat less so in recent years. These wealthy, secure societies are the domain of Nietzsche's last man, men without chests, who spend their lives in the endless pursuit of consumer satisfaction, but who have nothing at their core, no higher goals or ideals for which they are willing to strive and sacrifice. Such a life will not satisfy everyone. Megalothumia thrives on exceptionality, that is, taking big risks, engaging in monumental struggles, seeking large effects, because all of these lead to recognition of oneself as superior to others. Okay. So just as I was saying earlier, that what is lacking in current 21st century political culture is courageous integrity. Because all that we have are Nietzsche's men without chests, hollow men. And uh, and then and so I was suggesting, oh, we need people with the courage to stand up and to do great political acts. Okay. Fukuyama wants to say that comes from megalothumia that seeks public recognition, but that's precisely not what I'm talking about, right? What I'm suggesting is that we need people with courageous integrity to stand up against power, against society, against the culture in order to transform the culture into something better, just as Socrates did, just as Martin Luther King Jr. did, you know, uh, even as Abbie Hoffman did in his own quirky way. But but the kind of megalothumia that Fukuyama wants to emphasize is the kind of megalothumia of somebody like a Donald Rumsfeld, who just orchestrated the 2003 invasion of Baghdad just to have a big show and to bring glory to himself, despite its obvious, you know, disastrous consequences that were known from the beginning. That's not that we don't need that. We got that. We have you know, a war going on right now in 2023 in which the leaders on both sides are megalithumaniacs in this way, uh, pretending that you know, the Ukraine war is something akin to World War II or something. We got plenty of that. We just don't have people with courageous integrity to go against the grain, to actually work for peace, to actually focus on the ecological cataclysm, which is the real thing that we're being distracted from. So, you know, we got plenty of guys on Wall Street that are taking big risks with other people's money, uh, engaging in monumental struggles with other people's money because the government will just bail them out because there's nobody in Washington that has any sort of courageous integrity, et cetera, et cetera. We got plenty of megalithumaniacs. That's not what I'm arguing for, just to be clear. But it's with the problem is the way that Fukuyama focuses on this public recognition. What if it costs negating your dignity as a public figure? What if everybody hates you for a decision, but it's the right decision? How is that possible? Fukuyama, he does earlier explicitly say, well, there is that, but then he pushes it aside and then just goes on to act as if it doesn't exist. That the idea of somebody actually standing up with courageous integrity is just not going to happen. Like it's not part of human existence. I guess this is where I have a big problem with Fukuyama. Okay. In some cases, it can lead to a heroic leader like a Lincoln or a Churchill or Nelson Mandela. Okay, so yeah, I don't know that Lincoln and Churchill, you know, these guys were politicians. Nelson Mandela, also a politician later in life, but early in life, he was known as a terrorist. He was imprisoned for terrorism. And if he did the same things in the United States, would be considered a terrorist and be in jail and probably tortured and never seen or heard from again. So Nelson Mandela is the kind of guy that I'm talking about with courageous integrity. But Lincoln and Churchill, these are warmongers. And you know, Nelson Mandela was the little guy fighting against the big power. Lincoln was the big guy. Churchill was the big guy. Churchill was the prime minister of the largest empire that the world had ever known, the strongest navy especially that the world had ever seen, the largest economy the world had ever seen. To act boldly in wielding such overwhelming force, that's like bullying. That's not courageous. That's not courageous integrity. Nelson Mandela, small guy, courageous integrity, different. But in other cases, it can lead to tyrants like Caesar or Hitler or Mao, who led their societies into dictatorship and disaster. And again, or to bring home a point I made earlier about Donald Rumsfeld, during the Bush administration, uh, he and other members of the Bush administration entirely concocted a lie in order to convince, though it wasn't very convincing to a lot of people, to probably most people, about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that was some kind of justifying the invasion by the superpower of the world. The largest empire that the world has ever known, the United States, in 2003, invaded a small, tiny, irrelevant country and made a big show of it. That's not courageous. Thumos has to have courage built into it. If it's not courageous, it's not thumatic. And Fukuyama, he doesn't mention Rumsfeld or George W. Bush or Dick Cheney, when this is obviously what they did. They led the United States into a debacle in order to somehow gratify their ego as public figures in a megalothumatic way, the way he's describing. But it's not really thumos in the way that Socrates was describing. So on thumos, one more earlier part of the book, and this is a good example of an issue of identity politics, again, where Fukuyama is describing it accurately and, in a way that I can agree with. So at the beginning of chapter 9, Invisible Man, he says, economists assume that human beings are motivated by what they label preferences or utilities. Desires for material resources or goods, but they forget about thumos, the part of the soul that desires recognition by others. Again, I disagree with that part. Okay. Either as isothumia, recognition as equal in dignity to others, or megalothumia, recognition as superior. A great deal of what we conventionally take to be economic motivation driven by material needs or desires is in fact a thumatic desire for recognition of one's dignity or status. Take the issue of equal pay for equal work, something that has been at the core of the women's rights movement for decades. While women have made huge gains over the past 50 years in the labor force, considerable attention has been paid to the glass ceilings that have kept women out of senior management positions, or more recently, from the upper ranks of tech firms in Silicon Valley. Much of the agenda of modern feminism has been set not by working class women hoping to get jobs as firefighters or marine grunts, but by educated professional women seeking to rise closer to the top of the social hierarchy. Among this group, what is the real motive driving demands for equal pay? It is not economic in any conventional sense. A female lawyer who is passed over for partner, or who is made vice president but at a salary 10% lower than that of her male counterparts, is in no sense economically deprived. She is likely to be in the very top of the national income distribution and faces little economic deprivation. If she and her male counterpart were paid twice the relative salaries, the problem would still remain. Rather, the anger felt in such situations is not so much about resources as about justice. The pay she is awarded by the firm is important not so much because it provides needed resources, but rather because salary is a marker of dignity. And the firm is telling her that she is worth less than a man, even though her qualifications and contributions are equal or even superior. Salary is a matter of recognition. She would feel equally aggrieved if she was given the same pay but told that she would never hold a coveted title simply because she is a woman. Okay. I think this is right. And this is about dignity and public recognition. And that is what identity politics is often about. My only disagreement is the way that Fukuyama distorts the notion of thumos into his notion of dignity, which actually is very similar to the notion of dignitas that Romans sought within the Roman Republic. Rising up through the ranks, the political ranks of the Republic on the honorum cursum, this sort of honorary path to public recognition. Fukuyama is kind of taking an Athenian Greek idea and impressing upon it a very Roman, non-Greek sort of idea. So that's problematic. I think maybe his argument might work better if he actually just talked about Roman dignitas. That might make more sense, actually, now that I think about it.